on navigating any job interview for today. And we are expecting a few people to join, so hopefully they're able to. We'll look for a way to admit people automatically, but just in case, let's see who is on the line. Ugoma, are you going to be on the line for a while? Can I make you co-host so you can admit people, just so I can focus on other things? You can give a thumbs
Yeah,
up.
I can do that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, let me make you co-host. All right, thanks for volunteering. Yeah, so today really we're really focused on jobs and starting over um, in the challenges, and that's really what this week is going to be about. So, how do we prepare for an interview, for example? And just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I have probably worked in about 5 different jobs in the past 10 years. Just really I'm really like a domain person. So when I start at a job, if I if I'm not feeling the place, I'm just ready to move. And at other times, it's as soon as I start the job, I'm just ready to go somewhere else, which could be a good thing, and it could also be a bad thing. But let's talk about it all in today's session. Let's consider some of the whys. Why would someone want to leave their jobs? And how do you get another job? Let's say you're starting all over again. How easy is that process? And I know many of us will have different experiences with this topic depending on where you are in your journey. But my journey has been filled with opportunities. And sometimes I've had to create those opportunities just to make things happen. But in any case, I think what I'm trying to communicate to you today is, it's always possible to start from somewhere. As long as you have your focus, great things can happen. Now, I've put together this agenda for today, and it's really not location specific. So when I created this presentation, it was for an audience here in the US, but you can always apply this to your situation. And feel free to type in the chat if there are any resources that I may be missing that you think will be useful to everybody so they can see it. But here's just a list of the resources that I've compiled. So as far as our agenda for today, we're going to be talking about how to find jobs, where to find jobs, how to respond to job interview requests. So, it's not always the case where you're looking for a job and have to apply to a company. Sometimes the companies reach out to you. Has anyone had that experience where a company reaches out to you first? Please give a thumbs up or type it in the chat. I'm just curious to know now. Oh, or is it just me? Oh, have companies reach out to you? Okay, awesome. So that process is called poaching. So, just you can think of other meanings for poaching, but it's really just a company have found you worthy to be on their team, and they're considering you for hire. And one way they could reach out is to reach out to you on LinkedIn, or send you an email, or even call you directly in some cases. So how would you respond to those types of job interview requests? Because it matters what you say first. It matters how you respond for that conversation to continue. Sometimes it could be the end of the conversation if you don't respond, or if you give a response that's not matching what their expectations is, or what their expectations are. We're also going to explore some common questions that are asked in any interview. So I know there I put instructional design interview, which is what my field is, but this can be applied to any interview. And questions to ask your interviewer during the interview. Oh, there's so many questions that I can think of, but it's always good to ask, great questions, because those questions will tells a lot about you. So it tells the employer who you are. Are you someone who likes to solve problems? Are you genuinely interested in what they do? Or are you even someone they should consider hiring? So the questions that you ask is going to be very important. And we're going to learn, about some common questions that could differentiate you. It's all about differentiation, right? So, there are probably a number of people applying for the same position as you. So whichever way you can continue to differentiate yourself is going to be critical in these conversations. What to do after your interview? Who wants to take a wild guess? What should you do after your interview? What's one thing you should do after your interview? You can type it in the chat or come off mute.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My
Yeah,
name is
evening.
my name is Kingsley. So, for me personally, one thing I believe I can do. Let me use myself for example now. Let me not generalize it. One thing I
Yeah.
can do after an interview is to thank the interviewer. One, I
Yes.
thank you. And let me just say the way I will say thank you so much for the interview, and I look forward to joining your team and working with you. That's what I would say. Whether it's virtual interview or physical interview, I will just say thank you so much for the interview. I'm looking forward to joining your team.
Yeah. Awesome. That's a great response. That's it's actually one of the things you should do after your interview, and we'll cover some other things that you should do. But that was great. So it's straightforward, it's basic, but you can still add a little more information around your thank you, right? So, for example, if you forgot to mention something during the interview, the thank you letter is a way to add that extra layer of information. So, for example, you forgot to add your portfolio, or they asked you a question that you now know the answer to, that thank you message is also one way where you can recap what you discussed and add that extra bit of information. So thanks for responding.
Ma-
And then, sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask a question, or I should wait for you to finish?
No, go ahead, please. Ask your
Okay.
question.
You know, sometimes some interviews can be very tricky, and oftentimes some of these hiring team, they not all anyway, they have the wrong impression that the the potential employee
Mhm.
is hungry and blah blah blah. So I want to ask a question: is it wrong during an interview or after an interview for an employee, a potential employee to say, to ask the amount of the role, because sometimes they don't put the
Yes.
amount of the role in the
Yes.
job ad. So is it that you are being desperate or greedy, or you are being, oh, needy, give me? Does it give that message when you say, we want to know the pay package for that role? I want to know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to tell you yes and no. But we'll answer those questions when we get to that part. So I want you to be, at least a little bit patient, because I don't want to give you an answer that's not in depth at this time. But the answer actually is yes and no. So there are two sides to that coin, and I will talk about it in a few minutes. Um, as far as job boards, I would like to throw this one back to you guys. So, you know, I had a whole list, but those lists most likely apply to jobs out here. So, if there are any resources that you know of please share them in the chat so others can find them. And if you do, please, you can come off mute and actually say it, because this has been recorded. I don't know if folks will have access to the chat. So where do you go to look for jobs? I think everyone goes to LinkedIn. That one everyone kind of has in common. So LinkedIn is a professional website where, if you're working a corporate job, you probably have a LinkedIn page, which, think of it as your Facebook or any other tool out there. It's social, so you can add your bio and photo and, say things about yourself. It shows your job history and all that. And they do have a job board where you can, find jobs that are targeted within your location. But there are several ways to use LinkedIn. So you can have updates sent to your inbox on a daily basis, which is what I do. So if you don't have those notifications turned on, it's better. And you're in the job market, it's good to explore that side of things too. So don't just wait to go search. Sometimes the perfect job, let the AI do its job and send you the job matches. So you're in a better position and you're not just applying for random jobs, for example. It sends you targeted jobs. So let's say you're looking for just remote jobs, you can actually specify what types of job you want. You can specify the location of your job. You can specify the level of the job. So I think that's the right way to use LinkedIn job search. Don't just go browsing, but actually have the tool do its job and send you the recommendations for jobs. And not everybody can afford to pay for LinkedIn for the premium. I mean, I've never paid for those types of services, but if you have that flexibility, that could also give you an edge over others. So just paying for LinkedIn Premium, so that way you can see when a recruiter visits your profile, for example, so which companies are interested in hiring you. Jobberman, it looks like that's available in most parts of Africa. So if that's one that you use, please let us know in the chat. Or come off mute. Are there any other job sites out there that should be listed here and are not? Anybody? Indeed. Do you have access to Indeed? Just wondering. I use Indeed a lot. So, okay. So you have access to Indeed. All right. Awesome. Hailers.com. Believe it or not, we do have a job board and post jobs on a regular. Lolita does that for us. That's one place where, and we can't wait to hear the success stories of you finding a job on Hailers. We're just starting out. We're a small company, but we have big dreams. And with your support, definitely, we know it can only get better. So we would like to, work with corporate organizations and actually get you jobs. So that's where we're heading. So any support that you can give, if you know of a job board somewhere where we should be looking, we're ready to just provide as much information as we can. Freelancing. Now, freelancing doesn't mean it's free, right? Freelancing is, the way I see freelancing is it's a place where I get to do the fun jobs that I don't actually get to do on my corporate jobs. So freelancing just lets me earn some side income, usually in my own time, and the positions are usually remote, so I don't have to be at a place. It could be something I do over the weekend or in the evening when I'm off the clock on my full-time position. So, there are a lot of freelance communities out there, depending on where you're located. How to join may be tedious, but once you're in, right? I don't know if anyone has any experience with any of these freelance communities. LanXS, it's a new one. Upwork, Fiverr, those are more common freelance websites. I know for one, Upwork is a real great one. You can, find lots of opportunities on Upwork, and it's really very targeted. You can find more higher paying jobs in Upwork than you do on Fiverr. Fiverr, you can get some very low offers sometimes, but on Upwork, usually the clients have a good budget and are willing to, and the tools is even better. So, if you haven't explored these communities, I encourage you to. They're just great for, earning extra income. Now let's get into why we're here, right? So, how do you respond to a job interview request? I don't know about you, but my resume is always saved on my phone. Like, and I don't encourage this, but what if you're driving and you suddenly get a message for a job interview, right? It's gone just like that. So, it's a time where you want to park in a safe place, pull out your phone, and quickly, respond to that job interview request, or, and you need to be able to find your resume on your phone. Don't wait till you get to your computer. Like, that job is probably going to be gone by the time that happens. So if you're not doing that already, it's a wake-up call to have your updated resume. So your resume should always be updated. It's a constant piece of work, right? I've probably updated my resume twice in the last 2 weeks, just with different information, because new things, you get new revelations, new things every day. You might take a course or want to add this volunteer opportunity to your resume. It's not a static thing. It's, don't feel like you have to dust your resume up. It should be an active document that you're constantly updating. If you're applying to a sales position, your resume should be titled sales manager or something. It shouldn't be titled something else when you're applying for something else. Like, you need to be able to take the time to make those changes, or don't apply at all, because sometimes it's a mismatch. Like, you're applying for this job, but your resume is titled something else. Employers don't like that. So how do you respond to a job interview request? So, like we mentioned earlier, the request could be in form of coaching. It could also be just in form of, so it could even be a text message, although I don't recommend that. Those are usually folks who are trying to scam you, right? But here's a general way to respond to those messages. You thank the recruiter, be as optimistic as possible, right? It's, because in this case, you do have a full-time job, right? In most cases, when they reach out to you first, you have a job. They can see that, but they still want to hire you. So, be optimistic, but don't be too optimistic. It's not a time to be like, oh, I've been waiting for your call. No, just, play cool, and, just respond in a way that shows that you're interested and you're maybe just starting to look, but don't say too much, right? And I wish I had an example, but you can readily think of an example for those kind of things. It's a good place to ask a follow-up question about maybe an interview. So you talk about why your skills may align with what they're looking for, and just mention that you're open to exploring that discussion a little bit more. Always good to include a link to your portfolio. Now, who here has a portfolio, and who doesn't? Do you have a portfolio? How long have you had one? If you have a link to your portfolio, you can actually drop it in the chat. We would like to see it. Okay. So Ugoma seems like she does. Please tell us a little bit more. What made you decide to get a portfolio?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So, as a visual artist applying to residencies, art competitions, and all those online stuff, they always ask
Yeah.
for portfolio. At first, I didn't have one, and when I made my first portfolio, it wasn't good. It wasn't professional. It was just
Right.
it or how to make it look presentable. So I had to make a portfolio for myself.
Nice. Yeah. I definitely agree with you that having a portfolio, especially as a visual artist, is something that's just critical. You know, I actually recommend a portfolio for anything. You can, I don't care what your job is, you can have a portfolio. Like it's possible to have a portfolio regardless what your job is. And it could be a simple face card, right? Just something that shows who you are, your hobbies, whatever. Like, it cuts across a lot of industries. So, having a portfolio, and we've had several sessions on how to build your portfolio. So if you haven't caught up with those sessions, you can visit our YouTube page or even request it. We'll be happy to provide those. So really, your portfolio is a way to showcase your skills. It can contain visuals, it can contain projects that you worked on, just so people get a sense of who you are and what you can do. It is why you would need a portfolio. So I encourage you to, and there's so many free options out there. You can use Google Sites, Wix, and so on, or even build one if you know a bit of HTML or CSS. And it doesn't have to be that deep too. Like there's so many blog sites where you can add a portfolio. As long as they're active links that can take the reviewer to somewhere else, maybe your YouTube or something, like it's it's really super easy. So let's move on. In the interest of time, you can also provide your availability for an interview at that point. So, saying, okay, I'm available on Mondays and Tuesdays between 5 and 7. That carries that conversation forward. Now, here are some ways to confirm your request, and here are some ways to decline your request. So it's not all the time that it's going to work for you when they try to reach out to you, right? You can either use the letter on the left to confirm your interest, or you can use the letter on the right to politely decline. But also give a little bit of room, because you never know what else they have. I mean, they see some value in you, right? So what if that job is not the right one for you? You can still leave the door open on your way out and say, okay, let's have a conversation anyways. Or, are there any other positions you think might, you know, fit well with my skill set? So those are some ways where you can go about that. And I hope everyone can read this. I would read it, but it's probably going to take a lot of time to do so. All right. So we'll just move on from here. Now, what are some common questions when it comes to interviewing? Who can just help us out there? Like, what are some common questions that you've heard during an interview? And I probably have some insights into this because part of my
I've
job is to
had
train hiring managers.
questions like,
Yeah,
uh, what are your skill sets? Why do you think you're good for this?
exactly. Why do you think you're a good fit? What projects have you worked on in the past? How do you handle
Job,
conflict?
or what do you bring to the table?
Exactly. exactly. And you could also, I mean, the first question is usually tell us about yourself, right? That's usually the first question that we get. And I know that, you know, I do have an answer for that, but someone, there's a video we posted on the in the community yesterday just around this. And we're going to, you know, just take a minute to watch that video. Kingsley, I see your hands up. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to make a little contribution before my network went off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wanting to say that other things the HR usually ask is some they put it bluntly and they will be like, why should we hire you for this role?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they put it bluntly like that. Why should we hire you?
Yes, and that's a valid question, right? Like it's a
It
valid
is.
question. Why should we hire you?
Yes.
And what they're really asking at that point is, what makes you different from everybody else? You know, how can you align your skills with the job position, right? And it's a generic question, so you know, just knowing how to answer it. But one thing I will say though, and you may have heard this before, you may not have heard this, but if you're in an interview and they ask you a question, always check the length of time that they ask that question, right? Like don't over explain. Don't, you know, if they ask you a simple question, don't go on and on about, because they're still going to ask you those questions in the end, right? Like think about it. An interviewer probably has a set of questions they're going to ask you. When they ask you about A, don't jump into B and C and D. Like you've at that point, you've already, like, we're done. You can leave, right? So just pace yourself. Like don't say more than a few words. If they say more than a few words, give them back a few words, right? And if you're talking and they start to raise their eyebrow, that's a good sign for you to keep talking about that one thing that it looks like they're interested in. So being able to read visual cues is also important when it comes to interviewing, just from my experience. So we're gonna watch this quick video, and I hope you can hear the sound. It's just it's a really lovely video by um, the lady. She's going to just walk us through how to answer the most common interview question, which is tell us about yourself. So let's listen. And if we can't hear it, just let me know at once so I can stop it and make sure I'm sharing my sound.
There is no
Can you hear
sound.
it? Can we hear it? Thumbs up.
There is no sound. No
No
sound.
sound? Sorry.
No sound at all.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me stop sharing and then share again. Yeah, she was very clear about it, and just want to make sure. Window. Um, all right. Yes, you should be able to hear it
One
now.
interview question sometimes causes the most anxiety, but there is a simple formula for answering it which will work every time. Tell us about yourself. Most candidates panic when they get that question. They ramble through their entire CV, or they share irrelevant personal details, or they'll freeze completely, which makes a really awkward start that's very hard to recover from. But this question is actually your greatest opportunity to control the conversation in the interview. What I've found effective is a 60-second story arc. It has just 4 very easy to remember parts: the past, the present, the future, and then a bridge. Here's what it would sound like in real life. First, you start with the present. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a digital marketer who specializes in optimizing conversion. Then you go to your past. My background in psychology and data analysis allowed me to increase conversion sales by 32% in my current role. Then you go to the future. I'm excited about this position because your focus on user experience aligns with my approach to data-driven design. Then you end with your bridge. I'd love to hear more about the challenges that your team faces in this area. So why does it work? It works because this gives them a clear professional snapshot. It also demonstrates relevant value without overwhelming them, and it shows you've researched their needs. Importantly, though, it gives you control over the first impressions by selecting your most relevant skills. The goal with this question is to open strategic doors, not to tell your life story. So interviewers do remember candidates who make their job easier, and this will do that. So try scripting your own 60-second story arc before your next interview. Remember, it's simple: present, past, future, and bridge. Your confidence in that first answer will really set the tone for everything that follows.
Yeah, you should definitely go check her out. She's on YouTube. It's also on our page. Just just she's very well spoken, and just a lot of wisdom from that one response. So, and we'll move on. And like she said, it's all about making your interviewer comfortable, right? So, they shouldn't feel like they're on the edge of the seat, or, if you're uncomfortable, they're probably uncomfortable too. So, just, keeping a relaxed atmosphere when you're in an interview is very critical. Don't be combative. Don't talk over your interviewer. Those are things you normally don't hear, right? But they're equally just as important. So, don't be, especially if you're, say, in a virtual interviewing environment like this one. Eye contact is very important. Smiling, they can see you, so you want to present yourself in the best light possible. Now, as far as some of the common interview questions that you will hear, or the list here. So, tell me about yourself is the one we just went over. Why are you looking at this time? That's another tricky one. So, usually you have the upper hand if you're not really looking, but at the same time, it's good to say that you're starting to look, right? If you say you're seriously looking, that's also okay. That shows them that you're serious and you're someone they should pursue. But if you already have a job and you're saying, "Oh, I'm not sure," or you reached out like, "I wasn't thinking about it," like that doesn't make them feel like they should go after you more. Like, it actually does the opposite. It makes them feel like, Kingsley, you have your hands up. Just a second, let me complete this thought. So that actually makes them feel like they're maybe you're not worth pursuing, because they're going to dedicate a lot of resource and you're not even looking, right? So you want to say, okay, I do have a job, but I'm seriously looking at this time. All right, Kingsley, let's hear your question, please.
Sometimes when you
Yeah.
apply for a job, maybe you apply for the job 1-2 months ago. You
Yes.
just you send the mail, you send your CV, and life goes on. Probably you must have forgotten about the job, and the email must have gone down to your
Right.
um, mailbox.
Yes.
So, one fateful day, a call came across to you. You answer, and maybe they'll be like, "Hello, is that Mr. Kingsley?" I say,
Right.
"Yes." And they say, "You apply for a job in our company, and you have forgotten." Is it wrong to say, "I can't remember," or who am I speaking with? Or maybe they ask you, "You apply for a role," and now say, "I can't. Which position is that?" Maybe you have forgotten. Is it wrong? Is it right to ask the role that, or to tell them that you have already forgotten? Because it
Right.
happens sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's always good to do your homework. So, only respond when you're comfortable with, and you have to think on your feet sometimes. So there are ways to ask that question where You can answer it in a way where it doesn't sound like you're completely ignorant of who they are. You can just say, "Oh, tell me more about this, Dan," or just can you clarify what this position is? Like, and then they're going to go ahead and say more. So, that way you're not completely denying the fact that you know who they are. Because, come on, nobody wants to, have that kind of conversation where you can't remember who they are. And companies also look for people who already love their product. So let's say you want to work for a coffee company, for example. You already love drinking coffee. Like, that's already a plus. Would you hire somebody who doesn't drink coffee to work at Starbucks, for example? Um, you probably will hire someone who already drinks coffee and loves the product or uses the product. So, as much as you can say about those things you want to in an interview setting. Now, tell me about a project. That's These are all questions you should have answered prepared for. So, that's your opportunity to shine, to say what your role was on a particular project. And there are a number of examples I can think of, but just being able to connect, or to being able to explain your role in that project. Were you involved in the planning or the end to end? What problems did you solve at the end of the day? How was the solution that you provided? How was it received by the company? What numbers did that shift? Did you generate income, or did you recruit more talent? Those are all factors in that response. Kingsley, go ahead, please.
All right. So sometimes, not maybe it can happen during an oral interview, or maybe an interview you are giving questionnaires to fill out, either in a Google form or in a type form or Microsoft form to fill out and submit. Then sometimes I notice that there are sometimes the hiring team always pull out some tricky questions, and they be like, was there any time you were able to solve a conflict in a team? How did
Yeah,
you solve the conflict? So,
yeah. That's actually the next question on the screen. So you were just 1 second ahead of me there. So share an example of a time that you didn't quite agree with a solution that somebody provided. How did you win them over? That's a question about your interpersonal relations. Your emotional intelligence. How do you handle conflict? That's what they're wanting to know with that question. So every question has a purpose, right? Um, and there's the textbook response, which everybody's probably going to say the same thing. And then there's a way to. Yeah, something happened there. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm glad I'm able to rejoin. Sorry about that. It could be my network or something. Okay. And hope everyone is able to rejoin. And I think I was talking about, just breaking it down into phases, breaking down your response into phases, right? So identifying what the conflict was about, what it could potentially impact, the steps you took to resolve that conflict. So it could be maybe the way you were getting feedback, for example, from a team member. Just keeping the focus on the feedback rather than the person. So, and sometimes you may need to state it explicitly, like, oh, you took that feedback without, paying too much attention to who the what the person would to who the person was or their level above you or whatever. Like, but you kept focus on what they said and improved our process and understood where they were coming from. Being a product manager, I mean, there are ways to explain these things in a way that makes that shows you in a positive light and shows that you're someone who is result focused rather than someone who just looks at the personnel instead. You could get another question like, describe your design process. Well, that's if you're a designer anyway. So describe your process is more. Ogona, please go ahead with your question.
Okay, so my question is from the fourth one,
Yes.
where you would share an example of a time when you didn't quite agree with the solution someone has provided. So why being interviewed if you haven't had such experience? How do you answer that? Do you just make up something on the spot, or just tell them, "Oh, I haven't,
Yeah.
had such an experience"? Like, how do you go about it?
Right. And I don't know how long you've been working, but it's very tough not to have had an experience where, maybe not a conflict where, it becomes a problem in the office, but it could just be the way somebody talked to you or something. Like, that happens to us all the time. We may not, maybe we're kind people and just forgive at once, but there are potential conflicts wherever you turn. So, I think the question is really about, because there are differences in opinion. So you're trying to solve a problem. Maybe you're an events planner. There will always be differences in opinion on, let's use this vendor or let's use this color. That's all that question is asking. It's really asking you, it's wanting to know how your level of influence, how did you influence this person to maybe accept your point of view, or how did you succumb to their point of view, and what made you succumb to their point of view is what it is. So if I saw a question like this, I would break it down into four stages. So the first would probably be to identify what the conflict is. So you state it explicitly at the beginning, like, oh yeah, I can remember a time when, I had a difference of opinion with a team member, right? You've already stated what it is. And then you move on to what the impact of that decision. So maybe choosing this vendor over this vendor could have, this was going to be cheaper, but this had more quality. I thought we should go with the one with more quality, but this team member thought we should go with the one who's cheaper, right? So these questions, even though, and then you can go ahead and mention the results, right? These questions, even though they're generic, they ask them at every interview. It's always good to have a few examples in your back pocket. You're probably not going to escape a question like this in an interview. So just having those examples thought of beforehand is going to help you out. But in any case, be honest. And if you don't have a conflict, I wouldn't say I don't have a conflict. I probably would make something up anyway. I mean, not make something completely up, but look for a conflict in just your regular interactions, and you'll be able to answer that question better. Because saying you don't have a conflict is sometimes unbelievable and just may also imply that you don't collaborate a lot. So, because if you do collaborate, then you probably will face some conflict sometimes. I hope that helps. Okay. So, well, how do you make your courses engaging? That's for a specific industry. So, if you're a course designer, for example, what's your favorite part of the design process? Really, that's just wanting to know what's your favorite part of your job, for example. So is it helping people? Is it making money? Is it, there are ways to answer that question. So every time I get a job interview request, I would go to the company's website and go look at their mission and value statement. And then in my response to the questions, I would answer the question in a way that ties into their mission and value statement. If you can tie into any company's mission and values, like I would hire you just based off of you being able to connect with what we're trying to do here. Like, does that make sense? Like, just being able to say, okay, company XYZ they're trying to cure cancer, and you're able to say, okay, I'm trying to cure cancer too. Like, it might seem corny or something, but if you're talking to maybe the CEO of that company, like, there's no way he's going to bypass that passion that you have for what they're doing, what they're already doing. So just being able to maybe take a few words from the mission and values and saying, oh, okay, I see that the Red Cross wants to help people survive all over the world, and I also have that mission to help people in any way that I can. And be honest about it. Don't just say it. Like, if you don't connect with the mission, there's no need to interview for that company anyways. So just make sure to state the values. All you're doing is trying to find an alignment. The interview is about alignment. They're trying to see if you align with what, they want to see how you align. They also want to see what's unique about you. So being able to say some things that are unique, and you can take this one however you want, but I like to make my interviewers laugh. Like, I feel like it's a way to ease into the conversation. So when somebody, like, think of a joke, like, not the joke shouldn't be too far off, right? Like, it could just be something simple where, and if they're probably going to start the interview with, how are you? Or, let them talk first. So pick up the phone if it's a phone call, to say, how are you? Don't just say I'm fine. And you, like, you've almost ended that conversation. That conversation is dead on arrival. It's an open-ended question. How are you? Like, as simple as it is, it's also your opportunity to start to draw some alignments, to share some of your struggles, right? So a good example could be, hi, hello, Sam, how are you? Oh, I'm doing good. It's a great start to the week. Just, out here in Texas doing the best that I can with, there are ways to answer that question that makes, and I'm not saying you should say, so many times, but there's a way to answer that question where it leads to something else. Oh, you're in Texas. Oh, we're in New York. Then it starts to become, they know a little bit more about you. But if you just say, oh, fine, how are you? Like, that's, you've already killed that conversation. That's not showing that you're collaborative. It's not showing that you're someone who's engaging, you know. So just take that for what it is, but, you know, work on your small talk, on your conversation skills. How can you move a conversation forward, right? Questions to ask your interviewer. Anyone wants to help us here? What questions would you ask your interviewer during an interview?
I don't know. I didn't know before now that we had to actually ask questions to interviewers. This is my first time of hearing this.
Have you ever had a job interview?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. And well, so I mean, it's also different by location, I think. I mean, there are some job interviews where they're just looking for somebody to fill a position or to fill a seat. But you know, if it's an interview where, you know, maybe a corporate job or you're trying to get an overseas job or something, you are going to have to, you know, it's not mandatory, right? They're going to ask you, like, do you have any questions for us about this job, about the company, about, that's really your time to show that you've done a bit of research, right? So before the interview, you should have gone to their website, found out what their mission and value statement is, you know, seeing what they care about, what problems they're solving in the world. And so your questions should be based upon things that are not explicitly stated on the website, either on the website or in the job description. So for example, if the job description doesn't specifically say some things, that's when you should ask those questions. And some of the questions I would ask is, you know, questions about the position. So, you know, is this a new role? What challenges? What's the most challenging part of this position? Why do you need somebody to fill this position at this time? Asking those questions make it sound like you care. You know, questions about the organization, like how does leadership view our department? Like, do they see it as essential? That usually gets conversations going because, you know, everyone has an opinion of how leadership views, how the management views their department, right? So they want to quickly tell you more about that. Questions about the interviewer. So asking questions like, how long have you worked here? And what's your experience? Like, you know, in a genuine way, right? So you're interviewing the interviewer at that point. Where you could ask specific questions about the job role and what you're going to be doing day to day. Then finally, you can ask, are there any additional information that I can provide? Right? So that is something that you say when you notice that the interview is going south. So the interview isn't going so well. You would start hearing things like, oh, we're still talking to other candidates this week. And, you know, that's your cue that that interview is not going so well. And you need to fix that. The way that you fix that is to ask this question. Is there any additional information that I can provide? Because at that point, they're saying, we're not convinced, you know, or they keep asking you, like, do you have any question? If they keep asking you, do you have any question, then you need to bring those questions, right? Like, start from anywhere. You can ask about, you know, that just means they have some questions in mind they think you should be asking, and you're not asking that question yet. And they're giving you that opportunity because they see something, you know. So it's like it's a temperature check throughout. I mean, I'm not saying this to make you nervous or anything, but, you know, read the signs, right? Read the signs when you're in an interview. It's not going well, you know. Are you providing enough information? Are you providing too much information? You know, in either case, you either have to dial it up or dial it down. So being aware, the awareness is really what sets you apart. when can I expect to hear back? That's a generic question, right? I would I wouldn't ask that question unless you've gone through all the others, right? Because it's like you're asking you almost jump in the process at that point. Like they've not even considered you. You're asking when you want to hear back. Like, yeah, sure, we'll get back to you next week, right? So you want to first dig into the position, the organization, and so on before asking that question. Or you can say, in the end, you can say, what else can I tell you that would make me, a good fit for the position? What other information can I provide? Right? You throw that question back to them, right? What to do after the interview? I know we already talked about this at the beginning, but the thank you letter is the most obvious choice, and that you want to send within 24 hours of the interview. So usually the company recruiter will contact you first. So that's not your real interview. That's only an interview to make you to find out if you're worth presenting to the hiring manager. So, and this is the process out here. I don't know what applies at your location. So the recruiter calls you first. The recruiter may not know a lot about what you do or your expertise. So, it's not a good time to start throwing out jargons or acronyms and all of that. Like, it's a time to just show how human you are and how eager you are to work for the company. So if that goes well, that's usually a short interview or a phone interview. If that goes well, then they present you to the hiring manager for the real interview, where, and then maybe you can meet with the team as a next step and so on. After the interview is first, you want to send a thank you note within 24 hours. And it could be a simple, but don't try to sell it. Don't say, oh, it was wonderful meeting with you. I mean, depending, if your interview didn't go so well, don't try to embellish it. Saying it's wonderful just may not sit very well. You could just say, oh, just be casual about it if it didn't go so well. But if it did, by all means, oh, I had a great time talking to you today. When can we talk again? Like, don't say that, but you get the point. Send a thank you in the first 24 hours. Evaluate your performance. So this is on your own side now. Like, this is something you do as a best practice. Spend time, thinking about how you responded. Now use that, make corrections, and use that in your next interview. Don't just, do one interview and jump to the next one. Take lessons from each one, because that's going to eventually help you become someone who's just great at interviews. I love interviews, so, and it's only because I'm always just learning from each interview what to say in the next one. Think about what you learned. Think about what you learned about the company, about the role, because sometimes, you're being guided to something even greater than so, what if you learned in the interview that they use this tool that you don't even know about? It's a good time to quickly go download the free version of that tool and brush up. And even in your thank you letter, you can quickly create something and say, oh, look at what I created with this tool that I told you I hadn't heard about. That already tells me that you're someone who really wants this job and is a quick learner, and you're willing to, do the difficult stuff, right? So, send any supporting document, whether it's a resume, whether it's something you designed, that's a good time with your thank you letter. It's a good time to send a link to say, okay, I heard you talk about this during the interview, and I remember now that I worked on this project. Here's a link to it, and so on. So we're rounding off. I think time is already gone, but here's just a bonus of the things to do and not to do during a salary negotiation. Now, this, I wish we had more time to talk about this, but salary negotiation, sometimes it's okay to call the number first. Sometimes it's not okay, because whoever calls the first is really, that's where you start to have that discussion on. But don't go negotiating salary if you don't have the offer just yet. But just okay to say what range. Don't give a number. Just say, you can say, oh, 150,000 to 200,000. Like, give a range, but not too wide of a range where it's like, you just have to be realistic and be confident about what you're asking for. No, research the position before you start making offers or throwing out numbers. And don't accept the first offer. But if the offer is good, why not, right? But usual practice, don't try to accept the first offer. Just push back a little bit, and because that could compound. That $5 extra you're asking for could compound over the years if you plan to stay at the job for a long time. And don't forget the other perks. So stock options, health insurance, and all of that. You want to have those discussions when it comes to the salary negotiation. So it's assumed that you already have the offer at that point. So that's really it. Good luck. If you have any specific questions, feel free to send us a message, hailestalent@gmail.com. We still have more sessions coming up this weekend. We haven't scheduled them just yet, but be sure we will be making announcements soon for tomorrow and Sunday. All right. It was great having y'all join the session. And at this point, I'm going to stop the recording and just wish you a good rest of your day.